of socially responsible design through the lens of both data visualization and playful analog interaction. So I'm very well aware that this is a digital interaction panel, but my practice actually lies in analog interaction. So I thought I'd start by explaining how my interest in playful analog approaches to data visualization started. So I've been working on data viz projects within the field of social innovation for roughly about 8 years now. And what you see here is the usual outcomes from these projects. So they're usually charts that depict market sizes for glass waste applications, diagrams that quantify the environmental impacts of Australia's Antarctic infrastructure, and dashboards that show how organizations in the healthcare industry are capable of adapting to change. And while I feel that I'm definitely working in the right sector, I always somehow felt that there was something missing from the data viz work that I was doing. So at the same time, I was designing sunburst diagrams and flowcharts. I was also giving myself these quick, playful exercises, or what Albert Einstein calls thought experiments, on a weekly basis. The brief to myself was simple: to visualize my week using both collaged imagery and numerical information, and to finish 6 tiles within an hour. So that image you see on the top right-hand corner, for example, was from when I thought it was a really good idea to go on a fast for 20 hours. And as it turns out, that not eating for nearly a day just makes you really cranky and a very unpleasant person to be around. Then, as an extension of these thought experiments, I started playing with lines of inquiry inspired by passages in literature that had absolutely nothing to do with quantitative data. In response to these questions, I searched for quantitative data sets and depicted them using the same pictorial language in my weekly visual diary. That there, for example, is a question posed by Lewis Carroll in Alice in Wonderland. Why is a raven like a writing desk? I traced the etymology of the words raven and desk and found that there was 0 commonalities between both words, and concluded that Mr. Carroll may simply have been on magic mushrooms while he wrote Alice in Wonderland. Now, here's another question that I came up with after having read Marina Lvivka's novel, A Short History of Tractors in Ukrainian, asking, who are the toxic members in your family? Are they the ones who don't fit in, or are they the ones who judge them for it? And I've explored that question using data from the US Environmental Protection Agency, which identified 352 new pollutants in sewage sludge, unclassified due to a lack of risk assessment tools. Now, as I commenced my doctoral degree, I began to read the academic literature around play and playful design, and started to really understand what it was that I was actually doing by engaging with these thought experiments. In the fields of behavioral psychology and interaction, play, as opposed to rule-based games, has been proven to instill a sense of curiosity and allow people to be proactive, shape their own narratives, and make sense of the world. Play also needs to happen within a system. So one needs something to play with, be it a bag of marbles, pixels on a screen, or in my case, existing images and data. But within this system, play is messy, wild, and improvisational. So in this sense, it can therefore be used as a transformative tool for subverting norms and standards that may be oppressive or no longer beneficial. And with that, I approached my own practice by challenging normative visualization techniques, infusing network diagrams like these, for example, with playful collage. I used that to explore questions around shifting metaphorical representation in popular media, like Star Wars, to interrogate cultural protocols without having to fall in the trap of, quote-unquote, woke characterization, or the other extreme, the vortex of postmodernist truth. And I did these experiments with materiality too, looking at my own household's food consumption patterns through the amount of oxygen absorbers that came with packaged food that we ate over the course of a year. Not having a formal background in data science, this project explored how I, as a graphic designer and non-expert data analyst, could design a data visualization through my own intuitive visual fluency, and how the process could reveal insights into behavior and enable reflection. The design process using gelatin reflected 2021 as a year where self-preservation was foremost on the general population's mind. Vaccinations, maintaining sanity in lockdown, and in some parts of the world, surviving natural disasters. The process of using this historical method of food preservation was quite a visceral experience. It was sticky, disturbing, revolting, and actually reeking of dead cow tendons. However, the creative and playful process with these materials enabled me to build a metaphor that captured not only how much packaged food we ate, but allowed me to process feelings of anxiety that came with it, and to illustrate the zeitgeist of survival during that year. So then this got me thinking, what would happen if we gave non-designers a chance to go through the same experience and play with self-tracking data using their own vernacular visual fluency? What insights could it give them, and could it actually change their behavior? And this then became the question that led to my PhD thesis, Food Waste Ninjas and Sleeping Sheep, Understanding the Role of Vernacular Self-Tracking Data Visualizations in Civic Engagement and Influencing Habitual Food Wasting Behaviors, which is due in 5 days, actually. Now, just to give a super truncated background on data visualizations in digital self-tracking devices, and by this I mean those that are commercially available to the general public. So these have been found by many researchers to have the persuasive power to encourage day-to-day actions that reduce negative environmental impacts. So this here, for example, is an app developed in Finland that allows households to estimate their yearly food waste in terms of euro value and carbon footprint. There is, however, growing concern over these trackers from ethical, equitable, and behavioral perspectives. And yes, I am very well aware that I'm talking to people in the Masters of Design, Innovation, and Technology, and here I am about to tout its pitfalls. But I do think it's also important to critically reflect on how we can find that balance between the benefits of technology and human and more than human values. So as a top-down initiative from institutions, they can lead to a sense of surveillance and control, resulting in a lack of agency over one's own behaviors. Digital self-trackers can also perpetuate existing social and economic disparities, requiring access to expensive technology and relatively advanced levels of visual literacy. So they can often exclude individuals from low-income households and children. And finally, this is probably the topic that I'm most interested in, is that self-tracking technology can be an unreliable measure of lived experience. Normative visualization design practices that use geometric shapes can promote unhealthy self-scrutiny and fail to capture the complexities of reality in understanding human behavior. So to address these issues, my study looked at an analog, playful, participatory approach to designing self-tracking data visualizations. Now, just to clarify as well, so this approach certainly isn't unique, and I've been inspired by some great precedents, like Jamie Snyder and her team's work on analog self-tracking to manage bipolar disorder, and the iconic Dear Data project by Giorgio Lupi and Stephanie Posevec that visualized these designers' daily habits. So my study looked at the intersection of data physicalization, a practice that encodes data through bespoke, meaningful objects, the eudaimonic function of play, which suggests that even if play is not tangibly productive, it can elicit high levels of creative, independent behavior, and vernacular design, where non-experts rely on their intuitive visual fluency and access to materials to address specific pain points. Now, these principles in design were then seen through a theoretical framework that amalgamates three models in consumer behavior: the theory of planned behavior, the habit alteration model, and the motivation, ability, and opportunity framework. This behavior model that I kind of cobbled together from those three existing models argues that behavior results from an interplay of intentions, abilities, and opportunities. Intentions come from intrinsic motivation, which refers to personal attitudes, goals, emotions, and existing habits, as well as extrinsic motivations like rewards and punishment. Ability comes from the skill and knowledge to perform a behavior and an assessment of how easy or difficult it is to do. Opportunities, dictated by elements like sociocultural factors, also need to be present in order for behavior to occur. And through repetition and reflection, behavior can result in new habitual behavior. So I chose this multidirectional node link diagram to illustrate how these behavioral mechanisms may not be as linear or hierarchical as other models might suggest. So node link diagrams don't have arrows in it, but it's kind of up to the reader to unpack where the direction in which they want to read this diagram in. Now, why use food waste as a case? So I really could rabbit on with statistics on the financial and environmental impact of food waste in Australia, but I'll show you this image here instead. So this is a compost bin that I walk past every day where I live in Melbourne, in Fitzroy, which is an allegedly environmentally conscious Greens voting suburb. It's problematic for obvious reasons, because a whole shopping bag of perfectly edible vegetables has been disposed of, but it also highlights an over-reliance on composting as a means of addressing food waste. It's also significant to note that in Australia, majority of food waste comes from households with working parents and their children, or as they've been called, overproviders, as they tend to equate being a good parent with providing more food than necessary. Now, going into the details of the study design, I took a longitudinal mixed method approach, triangulating three research instruments: a 9-week habit tracker deployed as a probe, analyzed through ethnographic content analysis, a survey that assessed participants' frequency of performing food-saving behaviors before the probe, immediately after, and then 1 month after. And the results were analyzed through a paired samples frequency test. And then there were also 2 semi-structured interviews that gathered qualitative data on participants' initial motivation levels and clarified the survey and probe results. So the transcripts were analyzed through thematic analysis. And this is what a 2-part probe looked like. Part 1 contained visual nudges and information that promoted actions such as eating leftovers and storing food properly. It also included 3 packets of recyclable googly eye stickers to mark particular food items that needed to be used first. Part 2 consisted of the trackers, which were designed as a set of 2 postcards with markers and pens, with prompts for respondents to visually encode whether they had performed specific behaviors, such as we checked hunger levels before cooking and serving. The participants, consisting of overprovider households, were divided into 2 groups. An experiment group A were given parts 1 and 2 and saw each other's de-identified results online, while a control group B with the same demographic profile were only given part 1 and no tracker. Now, the study yielded rich qualitative data with participants representing their food-saving behaviors in a variety of ways, from sheep to rainbows to numbers, and a large amount of voluntary text-based data pointing towards high levels of interest and engagement despite being a longitudinal study. One of the participants even made his own food waste reduction campaign t-shirt inspired by the googly eyes. So after triangulating the results, there were a number of significant findings, 3 of which I'll explain here. The first is that the self-tracker led to the formation of new food-saving habitual behaviors. The paired samples frequency test showed that both groups in A increased the number of times they performed food-saving actions. However, only group A showed that they were able to sustain or increase the frequency of these actions a month after. So these graphs here, for example, shows the frequency of planning meals to be cooked for a set number of days, illustrating that more households in group A were able to maintain this a month after the probe was deployed. And this was the predominant pattern in the rest of the behaviors that were measured. The second significant finding was that a vernacular approach instilled a sense of autonomy and accountability. 2/3 of households chose to stray away from conventional graphs and charts and represented their actions through metaphors like ninjas, which pointed towards how precise, coordinated actions in the household were necessary to attain the mission of avoiding food waste. And also sleeping sheep, which alluded to families losing focus on certain food-saving activities on particular days. Having a playful mindset allowed people to choose, act, and express themselves in ways that were meaningful to them. Households in Group A also mentioned that having a greater sense of accountability because visualizations were their own creations. And lastly, the self-tracker was found to play a role in external motivation. So scrutinizing these results against the theoretical framework revealed that sociocultural factors and spatiotemporal environments acted as external motivators rather than macro-level opportunities. So those factors were moved from opportunity to extrinsic motivation on the other side of the model. So just imagine that moving over to the other side of the model. And autonomy and agency were introduced as intrinsic motivators. Sociocultural factors were found to have a closer relationship to emotions. For example, participants reported feelings of pride from using the entire vegetable because it was seen as doing the right thing according to specific cultural norms. Now, I'll wrap up with lessons learned from this research. So first, while there's no one perfect behavior change theory, using theory can offer a guide for designers to construct interventions, unpack active ingredients, and identify common factors contributing to observed outcomes. Second, so I'm by no means suggesting that vernacular visualizations be a replacement for digital tracking technology, but they can certainly be used as a tool to augment existing frameworks and offer alternatives. And finally, a playful approach enhances the potential of data visualization to increase motivation, allow access to broader audiences, subvert norms, instigate conversation, and enable agency. So I hope I've clarified how, what my practice is and how socially responsible design, data visualization, and playful analog interaction can all work together. So thank you very much.